So, Harry, happy birthday.
Thank you, Elin.
This is your life. Well, it nearly is. Welcome to 7 decades of Harry Christophers. And it is a joy for me, as your singer, colleague, friend, to be able to dive back into these 7 decades and see what's made you the person you are, and then what's made the 16 the being that has been entertaining us for so long. So, can we just start right back at the beginning? So 1953 up to 1963, where, by the looks of things, music wasn't necessarily filling your life. So just take us back to the start.
Yes, this is scary. I was born in a pub.
Yeah.
In the middle of Kent, Wheel of Kent, Peacock Inn in Gowters. It's still there, and serves Shepherd Neame these days. And so the nearest I came to sort of music was basically with my mum playing the Christmas carols in the bar and the local farmers. So the clientele would just be the local farmers because, as I say, it was middle of nowhere, hop fields behind, and my dad was the landlord, and that was it really. My mum did play that. She played the piano pretty well actually, and I've got some old music albums of her in the loft. Beethoven sonatas and all sorts of things, all beautifully kept. Her surname at the top, Constance Clavering Thorpe. That's her maiden name.
And clearly they were supportive of you wanting to go on to sing. But who was it that spotted that lovely voice that got you further?
Well, again, I've no idea because we had to move from the pub to Canterbury, and I was approaching 9 years old, and my dad took over a sweet shop and tobacconist in Canterbury, and the decision was, where do we send Harry to school? And my mum had asked, obviously, somebody at my primary school in Goudhurst, and he had said, well, look, he's got a nice little voice, try for the choir school. So that was it. So I went for an audition at the choir school. I didn't know I could sing, and I couldn't really. But I remember the audition really well because we had to read a psalm, not musically read a psalm, but just verbally read the psalm. And I could read pretty well in those days, and so I got my mouth around all these difficult words, and I'm sure that's why I got into the choir school. But suddenly, I'd never been in a cathedral. The closest I'd come to a church was probably when I was baptised at Gowters Parish Church, and so to get to a cathedral and see this phenomenal space was just amazing.
And one of the pieces you've chosen is Britain from the Ceremony of Carols. Now, obviously, that's going to sneak into our next decade, but why do you think this resonates with you from your very earliest time, even sort of pre-singing? Why does this hold such memories?
Well, it was being a chorister at Canterbury and singing it in the chapter house. It was recorded by Radio 3. There was 36 choristers, and we sang it. And we had this inspirational choir master called Alan Wicks. And Alan just sort of used to throw music at us as old music, new music, and he loved the music of Britain. And I think for any kid singing Britain Ceremony of Carols, it's just brilliant.
Do you know, I remember singing that in Welsh.
Yeah,
when I was at school, that was one of the things we learnt earlier than anything else. And I remember the harp, and obviously it being a Welsh harp, suddenly hearing it in that Britain mode was totally different. But it does stay with us, doesn't it? The other music you've chosen, there's so many pieces across these discs, but you've gone for Purcell. Now, Purcell keeps coming back through the many decades. What's so special about Purcell's music?
Well, again, it was Alan Wicks, and he loved Purcell. And remember years later him saying to me, he said, Harry, I knew Purcell was a good composer, but I didn't know why. And I think about that with Alan. Yes, he just got music, and he had this innate musicianship, and that's remained with me, whether it was, Thou Knowest, Lord, the Secrets of the Hearts, or Oh, Sing Unto the Lord. And that's the piece I do remember really well, because Alan brought in a string quartet. And we had a string quartet for the anthem. But it must have been a Sunday afternoon because it's quite a long piece. But it was great.
And so it all began.
Yeah.
Decade number 2 finds you at King's in Canterbury. How did you find it there? a whole new world for you. The repertoire in particular, how did it feel walking into that world?
It was tough, actually. I mean, having been a chorister at Canterbury, and then suddenly going to senior school, and King's was a very academic school. It was phenomenal for sport, like Sir David Gower, comes cricket. But it was also brilliant for music, and there were a lot of us that went from Canterbury Choir School to King's, so that was nice. I was a day boy as well. It was one day boy house in those days, and I could walk to school, and it was really great. But there was so much music going on there. There was again another inspirational director of music, having had Alan Wicks at choir school. Edward Wright, director of music at King's Canterbury. He conducted the orchestras, he conducted the Madrigal Society, the choir, you know, he gave us singing lessons a lot. And so one was sort of steeped into this phenomenal music tradition, because at that school there were a lot of choristers from all over the country who were going to King's because it got that reputation.
And I remember you saying that you used to learn arias. It wasn't just that you sang chorally, you would sing songs and different repertoire expanded.
Oh, yeah, that was very much as a chorister at Canterbury. We on Thursday evensongs at the choir school, we sang proper anthems. We would sing not only soprano arias but also alto arias from the Passions, from Bach's Passions, Handel oratorios. I even got a vague memory of that we sang the first movement of Mozart's Exsultate Jubilate, but that must have been pretty fierce. But anyway, but we were told to, we're not told, we were given proper music, real music to get our teeth into.
Do you think that helped you to understand the vast range of repertoire that you've now come to love? Because if you look at your recordings, they span centuries. I mean, we're talking decades today, but it really goes across the board. Is this where you discovered your love for Renaissance music in particular, do you think?
I'm not sure about the Renaissance music. It was just a love of music and a sense of architecture that went through this music, and of phrasing and yeah, I mean, having been a chorister at Canterbury, you've got Canterbury Cathedral. I mean, what better place to have to sing in? And then King's Canterbury, we had phenomenal symphony orchestra. I think there was something like 7 National Youth Orchestra players in the orchestra. I mean, this was incredible days. Many of them in professional music today, and it was great. I mean, it was just sort of, it was all there for us to be a part of.
It's lovely to look at the selection you've got for this decade. You've got from Byrd up to Brahms. Why do you think that they call to you in such presumably very different ways, but why do you think they bring back such memories then?
Well, Byrd, that was very much from being a chorister at Canterbury, and there was a piece, This Day Christ Was Born, which I just remember, and we would only perhaps sung it on two successive years, maybe at Christmas, but it stuck with me. Fantastic piece, rhythmically really complex. I mean, that was part of Alan. You know, it didn't matter what the music was. It didn't. The more difficult it was, he would just throw it at us, and we just had to do it, and that was great and a good discipline. As I said before, you know, going to King's, introduction to all this amazing romantic music and much later music, and that was partly because I was a clarinetist. So I loved playing the clarinet. I really did enjoy it. My teacher was a military band player from Deal Marines. Like all the wind and brass teachers were from the Deal Marine band, and they were just fantastic. And we played Brahms 1, I remember, in the symphony orchestra, and I just loved it.
Do you think, it just makes me think so much about how you conduct. It's just making me realise how much of you has come through to what you give us as singers now. The sound of the choristers, and then obviously moving up into senior school, how much do you think you've wanted to recreate that across time? Because obviously the 16 we sing in a particular way, but it's not a chorister sound at all. Yeah. So how has that informed that lovely soprano line in particular that you're looking for?
Oh, wow, that's a difficult one. I mean, I suppose a lot of it's to do with the fact that every piece of music I was coming to was new to me.
Yeah.
So not coming from a family that went to concerts. I never went to a concert, never ever. In all my right through my teenage years, I think probably the first concert I went to was when I was at Oxford, probably, I don't know. So part of it is that sense of everything being new and me wanting to find my way into it, and just sheer enjoyment, realisation that how much importance is on a building. And sounds and also the people I was with. I played the clarinet with Andrew Mariner, principal clarinets of the LSO, Academy of St Martin in the Fields, etc. These were great times. But also there was other music going on. This was a great era of pop music.
Yeah.
Beatles, Stones.
Yeah.
I remember coming into school, especially on a Sunday. Bearing in mind I was a day boy, coming into a Sunday afternoon, because going into the depths of some music school and playing Black Sabbath, Paranoid, because this record being banned by the school. I can't remember the exact scenario, but we were listening to it in secret. These were great days.
Well, you can't put that into a choral pilgrimage, don't you?
I'm working on it.
So it explains so much, and I think all of this really builds the picture up towards how and when you then ended up going to Magdalen, Oxford, which is the next decade in your life.
Yeah, and a very special decade.
Now, anybody who knows you knows how dear Oxford and Magdalen are to your heart. So how did you get in the first place? We all know how we've ended up places, but do you have memories of how you auditioned, how you got there?
God, yes, by sheer luck. You have to be brainy to get into Oxford. I certainly wasn't that. And in those days, choral scholarships were a sort of way in, just the same as, being good at drama or good at rugby or rowing.
Yeah.
Edred Wright, who was my director of music Kings, there had been numerous choral scholars that he'd had through his students, and he said, right, you should go for a choral scholarship at Oxbridge. So I go up, and I went to Cambridge first for my trials, then I went to Oxford. For some reason, I wanted to go to Oxford. All my friends had gone to Cambridge, and I was trying to work out why this was, and I think it partly was the fact that I didn't sort of want to live in their shadow anymore, and I sort of needed to be myself. So Magdalen was the answer. I went up to read classics. Now I know that might come as a surprise to most people, but that's the only thing I could read. Those are my A levels. I was rubbish at it, but I had this fantastic tutor, Ollie Taplin, who basically started. We were his first intake at Magdalen, and there were 7 of us, and he was just brilliant. He got me through moderations in classics. It was after 2 years. I've never worked so hard in my life, but I was also in the choir, and I changed to music after 2 years. Bernard Rose was the organist and choir master with this wonderful name, Informata Choristarum. The present day one, of course, is Mark Williams, our good friend. But I sang in the choir, and it was just amazing. This, first time away from home, all hell broke loose, really. I just had a lovely time.
Made you survive.
Yes.
And obviously with that, you've got your 6-day week, your evensongs, you've got quite sort of formulaic ways of singing, haven't you? I'm a Clare chorister, so I remember those days very well. And yet this chance to explore new repertoire. Do you feel that you were challenged? Was this a whole new discovery for you?
Oh, my goodness me, yes. Being a chorister at Canterbury, yes, we had new music every day, but we had a lot of rehearsal for it, comparatively. Magdalen, it was up to us to look at the music. Bernard Rose, Bernard would always put down, he had this thing about doing sort of eras. So if it was Tompkins, you'd have a whole service of Tompkins. If it was Leighton, you'd have a whole service of Leighton, etc. And so, and again, new music every day, and having to do it correctly.
Yeah.
It was a small chapel, very intimate chapel.
So in those many evensongs that you sang and all the other choral activities you had going on at the time, was there any repertoire that really stood out for you?
Well, of course, this is where I came to know the Renaissance music so much. But actually, it wasn't anything at Magdalen. It was something at Christchurch. Simon Preston was at Christchurch, Oxford at the time, and he released and Alvin Stravinsky's Symphony of Psalms. And I remember hearing that, buying that LP, listening to it the first time with the likes of Franz Steele, who was a chorus scholar at the time, and also member of the 16 later. And it was in the organ scholars' room. We'd been out for a few pints on a Friday evening, came back, listened to this, and it was amazing. I thought, wow, why have I never heard this piece before? And I remember saying to Fran, one day I'm going to record that. And I did. Can't remember how many boys there were. I think a dozen choristers, but then there were 12 academical clerks, we were called. It was a little, maybe a little less of the academical accountants, but we were, you're suddenly thrown into that community and you make friends for life. And out of my, the 5 or 6 of us that went up, one's a high Supreme Court judge today, another's a top political analyst, etc. And it's amazing.
You're all game changers.
Oh, of course.
But also, I suppose that's the way of creating that community, which you then went on to begin when you founded the 16. How much do you think Magdalen in particular affected your way of gathering people, if you like, of networking and understanding who's good at what?
I think, the one thing I think I really did learn at Magdalen was to think for yourself. And that was, again, that was what Bernard Rose and my other tutor, David Woolston, would always say, they weren't interested in people just copying out reams from a textbook or copying somebody other interpretation. Just think for yourself. But also that, as I say, the camaraderie that is created there and of these fantastic colleagues, and also mixing not just from people at Magdalen, but people who are at other colleges, New College, Christchurch, and that whole sort of mix of music that you got at Oxford allowed us as sort of students to just put on things ourselves. So I sang things I should never have sung at all. I was not capable of singing, and I performed things that really, I didn't really know what I was doing. But I had good teachers.
And I think it all comes down to being led and being given the opportunity and being told this is not beyond you, isn't it? And that's what you've always done in the 16 as well, is just lay it out there. We're going to do this. We're going to be super at this. And then that self-belief kind of takes you along the crest of a wave, if you like.
I think it is that self-belief. I mean, Bernard Rose is a very special person because I remember in chapel rehearsals, he would always pose questions and he would never ridicule us if we made the most banal answer to that. And I always remember that, and I thought, that's great. I mean, he probably thought, what a stupid answer that was. He would never make us look stupid, but he would always put. He would make demands of us. There's no there's no bones about that. And but it is that ability to sort of be just working your way things, making mistakes, experimenting, and that's what university is all about.
Do you think it was a natural step then and a progression for you to go to Westminster Abbey and join the choir there? That must have been quite a wrench to leave Oxford.
Oh, it was, but and again in those days there were numerous jobs I could have done. I mean, this was the beauty of those days. Nobody came out of university knowing what the heck they wanted to do. I had a job I could have been a tea boy for Southern Television. I had a place at a Hochschule for Art and Music in Canberra, all sorts of things. Research assistant at the British Museum, had that. No way was I going to be stuck over a table looking at artefacts. And suddenly, Bernard Rose has a phone call from Douglas Guest at Westminster Abbey saying, I've got a couple of tenor vacancies, anybody you've got? So I go down and have my audition, and lo and behold, I get it. So Westminster Abbey, living in London, well, I mean, there's no argument.
A whole new world.
Yeah.
So we're into the 4th decade, which is 83 to 93, but we're going to cheat a little bit because obviously we want to really look over when and why you founded the 16, but also we're just going to look at the beginnings of that. So you've gone to Westminster Abbey, you've left Magdalen, but you've made so many connections there. How do you think that going from Westminster and then from there to the BBC Singers, how do you think all of this sort of came together to explain why you started the 16 and how you developed the group?
Well, I suppose in many ways I needed to know that I didn't want to sing anymore. And that's not the reason we're going to Westminster Abbey. That was a natural progression from Magdalen. I was enjoying my singing, and the chance to sing in London in another wonderful place. I mean, can you imagine Canterbury Cathedral, Magdalen College, Oxford, Westminster Abbey, and I sat next to the wonderful David James of the Handelian Ensemble. And I had so much fun singing. It was this thrust into this community. Again, I didn't know London at all. I was a Canterbury lad. I'd maybe been to it once or twice. So I was so naive, but thrown into this wonderful community at the Abbey. It was just amazing. Lots of fabulous music, and then I needed to sort of start beginning to do my own thing. I did enjoy singing. But I knew fundamentally that I could make a better job of getting the best out of people in front of me if I stood in front of them.
That's a lovely, humble yet sensible call, isn't it? Because it is quite hard when you're within a choir and you find yourself wanting to lead the way. You've got your own ideas and yet you're still following a conductor. Did that then experience at the BBC, did that help you and consolidate your decision, working with presumably various conductors?
Oh, yes. I mean, quite frankly, I joined the BBC Singers knowing that I didn't want to sing anymore, and they knew that as well. The powers that be knew, but there was a vacancy there, and they were so supportive. I remember Geoffrey Mitchell and John Paul. Geoffrey was the manager of BBC Singers in those days. John Paul was the conductor, and both of them saying to me, "Look, Harry, we'll support you for every bit of conducting you want to do." I mean, that was amazing. What an opportunity. And I'm so pleased they did persuade me to join the Singers, because I was able to sing with some phenomenal people. And under the baton, we did a lot with the Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah.
So it was a lot with the likes of Boulez, Rossosvensky, Seiji Ozawa. It was just immense. And then in the Singers, we got through repertoire like nobody's business. First 2 months of every year was wall-to-wall contemporary music. Some of it I loved, some of it I didn't like. But I've always talked about this black book I had, which I did. Unfortunately, I've lost it. I don't possess it anymore. But in the front of it, I had written down all the pieces I knew I wanted to do with the 16, which I, really recently formed. And in the back of it, I'm afraid it was all those pieces I never wanted to see ever again in my life. And that's remained so. But BBC introduced the likes of Messiaen, Poulenc. I mean, just what an incredible composer. And we did his Figure Remain, of course, which had been first performed by the BBC Singers, much to Poulenc's joy, but also sadness, because apparently when the first performance, when the BBC Singers started singing, they sang it in English, and his face dropped.
What a shame.
I know, but of course that was, again, the very early days.
Yeah.
So, one of the pieces that I loved doing with the 16, not only Figure Remain, was also Soir de Neige, which was the precursor of Figure Remain, this sort of mini cantata. Just brilliant music. I mean, you know how difficult those pieces are.
What I've always loved, is the way that you've programmed things. You blend styles of music, genres, eras, and you pace programs really, really beautifully. They're just a joy to be a part of. Do you think some of that's come from watching other conductors build their programs as well?
I think it has. I think probably more to do with the programs that are not being built. I think because I remember all those really well. I remember, I remember countless sort of earlier music concerts where there would be a mass in one half and mass in the second half, and I thought, hang on, no, we can't do that. It's all the same format, and so bit by bit I wanted to sort of just compare and contrast. And actually be quite blatant about things, I mean, I remember one pilgrimage in more recent years, I put Palestrine and Poulenc together, and it really worked. Cornish and Benjamin Britten.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Medieval music and Parry. And it sort of contrasts work really well.
But it's clever as well because you're a singer as well as being a conductor. You do have to know it from both sides. You need to know stamina-wise what's going to work and placing-wise. You can't just be singing, banging out all these top notes and then grumbling at the bottom. So it's thinking carefully about how it all comes together. Now, it would be remiss of me in this decade not to mention that this may also have opened the doors to Arsenal Football Club. So just briefly, tell me about your love of Arsenal.
Well, that started in 1977 when I left Magdalen and moved to London with my good friend Peter Hayward. Pete and I, the first Saturday we moved in, we were lost for something to do, and I sort of pulled back the net curtain, and there were all these people walking past, and we went, hang on, there's a football ground around us. So we went down, and got tickets to Highbury on that very Saturday, and it was Arsenal against Manchester United, and Arsenal had just bought a guy called Malcolm McDonald from Newcastle United, and Arsenal won 3-2, and it was the fastest game of football I'd ever seen in my life. Hooked. That was it.
Music and Arsenal.
Yeah, and then Pete bought me for my 50th birthday, I think it was, or maybe my 60th birthday, a stone. Pete and I got a stone at the Emirates.
So London's got a lot to answer for between Westminster Abbey, setting up the BBC Singers, your love for Arsenal, and presumably also gave you the wings to start developing your newly founded group, the 16.
It certainly did.
So we're in 1993. Now, obviously by now the 16 is in full swing, having been started in 1979. That was a concert in St John Smith Square, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
So how did you get from 1979, starting your own group with a group of friends and colleagues, to being what was really internationally acclaimed and a huge recording artist by the 90s?
Bit of luck, I think. Luck's got.
You always say it's luck. You're far too humble.
So. But there, certain stages, there was a big moment when BBC producer called Hugh Keat came and listened to the group and said, "Look, I want you to would you do a BBC lunchtime concert?" So I said yes. Well, I think we were the first group, apart from the BBC Singers, to have ever done a BBC lunchtime concert choir. So that was one thing. Then meeting the phenomenal, or writing to the phenomenal Ted Perry of Hyperion Records. So then there starts the recordings, and then of course, come the 90s, your late 80s, 90s, you're talking about a CD industry that had gone mad, the record industry had just gone berserk. And we were recording for so many companies, so much music. I look back on it with great pleasure, but also a certain amount of horror, really, to think that actually one was rehearsing, doing concerts, then recording, and then you put it away, then you go on to the next project. And it wouldn't be till years later, I'd revisit. I think I recorded Bach's Be in Minor Mass in 1993. I didn't perform it again for another 10 years or something. And that's sort of crazy. Yeah. So those things have changed in much more recent times. But this was a group that was touring all over the place. Spain was our second home. Lovely tours of Japan, America, going down to Australia. Tours of Europe. It was heyday.
It was the heyday. I mean, I feel like I then joined the heyday later on in that time. But what I felt when I joined, which was definitely true from the beginning, is that the 16 feels like a family. I mean, exceptionally high quality family with incredible skills, but it's always felt like it's a fantastic group of colleagues and friends coming together. How have you curated that sound from your choice of people?
Oh, gosh. I constantly, with our Genesis 16, our student project at the moment, I constantly talk to people about, being themselves, about supporting their colleague. And, those are sort of unwritten rules which happened in those days, the 16, and still do today. I choose the people who I know are great, have fantastic personalities. I mean, they don't all, it's a bit like comedians, isn't it? Morecambe and Wyatt. They don't all have to be funny, the hilarious guys. You need the sort of straighter one to combat. But that's that sort of blend we have in the 16, which is fantastic. And as you say, they are all friends. It is all a family. And the one thing I feel with the singers we have is I want them to give of themselves. I want them to be themselves. I want their voice to come out. And if that happens, then you've already produced something that is relaxing in a way for that singer. To me, if there's a mistake in a concert, forget about it. We get on. We might make a joke about it. I mean, the number of times somebody makes I'm usually the one that says the words wrongly, but if somebody makes a mistake, I'll give a little smile. It won't be daggers drawn. It might be one or two occasions when I want to just bring things together. But basically, there's that feel of camaraderie and support from everybody and enjoyment. Come on, we're entertainers. We need to be doing that all the time. Doesn't matter if it's a penitential piece or it's a joyous piece. We're ultimately entertainers. We're sort of producing music for this wonderful public that come to listen to us.
Well, I can confirm that, just for the camera, that it's very enjoyable. And exactly that there is a freedom, there's a relaxation that once you've done the hard work of finding the voices and combining the voices, actually, you just want to trust your professionals to do what they do. And they can take the music from you. And rehearsals are such a joy because it doesn't matter how many times we've done a piece, it does feel like a discovery of a little corner or a little sort of, rubato here or a new dynamic there. It feels like a voyage of discovery every time. How do you feel about going back? You've chosen Handel for this decade. You've got Victoria. We've got Guerrero. This music comes up again and again, I suppose, in the programming. How do you feel about coming back to composers? Is there anything new? Do you find that it's about the matching of composers, or is it just genuinely joyful to revisit them?
Oh, it's all of those, really. I mean, Victoria is a special composer to the 16, and he writes so well for voices. Everybody likes singing his music. And I think for the 16, I mean, everybody in the choir knows full well that we're repeating programs, and everybody knows that I'll do something different.
You've got to watch.
You've got to watch. And if you're not watching, then it just takes one person. It just falls out of sync. So everybody, that's an unwritten rule, and everybody does, and that keeps it alive. And that's so important. Victoria's music has been such a path grip. I mean, recorded so much of it. I love his music. I mean, Negro Sum is a song of songs. You feel with Victoria, I think he wrote all sacred music. I don't think he wrote a single piece of secular music. But you feel with a song of songs, Negro Sum and pieces like that, he's sort of letting his hair down. Yeah, he's just enjoying himself. And that comes across. Yeah, Guerrero. There's a big Iberian Peninsula repertoire, the Portuguese.
And we've enjoyed the Iberian tours.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah.
And with all that touring, and we call the 16 family, but obviously you've got your own family because by now you've married Lonnie a while ago, so the early 80s, and you've got your 4 children. How have they been part of the musical journey, and how have they been part of the 16?
Well, I mean, of course, I married Lonnie the year we formed the 16, so it was 1979. So, every time there's an anniversary, 40th anniversary, it's
that's
handy
as
well. It is, but it's so important. I mean, Lonnie she's just so supportive of what I do, and also my harshest critic in many ways, which is good. It just keeps me on the level. If I'm sort of concerned about something and I'm doing in a piece of music, I very often put it past her. And then my children have been, they've all grown up with the 16 family around them, and they're all artists in their own way, and none of them gone into professional music per se. But I've got actors and all sorts of things, and teachers.
Very important. Yeah. And who'd have known back in 1979 how much support you're going to need, because look at all the decades that the 16 has gone on to give us.
I know, gosh, it's worrying really in a way.
Doesn't stop there.
Kings shall be thy nursing fathers, shall be thy nursing fathers, thy nursing fathers.
So we're into the 6th decade at this point, start of 2003, and the 16 by now is already nearly a quarter of a century old. So what direction did you want the group to go in? Did you have major plans, or were you very much taking the group as it went and sort of working with the people you had?
I was winging it.
Winging it. I'm trying not to say winging it.
Things were happening. I mean, the thing is, we'd had such a phenomenal recording era. And when that was all going pear-shaped, I mean, the classical industry was going pear-shaped, end of the 1990s. And so we were having to think of new things and what to do. And the choral pilgrimage, of course, was the major one.
Yeah.
And forming Coro. I mean, the two of them happened pretty quickly. Choral pilgrimage started 2000, obviously Millennium Project, just destined for 1 year. I mean, 12 concerts from York to Canterbury.
Really, 1 year?
Yeah, that's all we planned. And everybody said we'd be bankrupt as a result of it. We'd start raving balmy. How can you possibly do concerts outside London?
Yeah.
It's sort of all quite bizarre, really. But it was such a success that it's continued, and here we are 24 years later, still doing the pilgrimage. And then Coro, Coro was formed something like 2002. Again, people said we were mad. The recording industry, recording companies were sort of collapsing, and here we were starting one. But it was the most brilliant thing we did.
Yeah.
We were, and taking that attitude. I mean, you know me. I've always loved pop music in a big way. I spend every time I'm in the kitchen cooking Lonnie Despairs, I'm playing my Rolling Stones and my Led Zeppelin, etc. But and part of the thing with the choral pilgrimage and Coro was, hey, the classical world is being missing a big trick for all these years. We're so stupid. A pop group records an album, tours it.
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing that? So that was what basically we did with Coro. We record an album.
Yeah.
We tour that programme to sometimes up to 30 venues and add-ons through the year. Brilliant.
And I remember that because that was also the Universal time, wasn't it? We signed up with Universal for a little bit. So we actually were pop stars for a bit. We had some very cool photographs. Brit Awards. But then that sort of added, I think, into that understanding of we were trying to get music out to a wider audience, which is the joy of the choral pilgrimage. You get very loyal followers, but you also get new people with every programme. Does it ever become a burden to programme the choral pilgrimage, or is it still something you're excited about?
The only way it becomes a burden is because I've got to think of new music each year, and think of a new programme. But once I've done that, the process after that is just a sheer joy. And part of the great joy of the pilgrimage is that we go to these communities up and down the country. We forge relationships with them. So when we do a concert in Lancaster or Tewkesbury or Truro, people come to that, and or people come from other parts of the country because they say to them, "Oh, we've never been to Truro. Let's go and spend a weekend taking the choral pilgrimage," and that's just brilliant. And again, the greatest joy is coming across somebody who is coming to the 16 for the first time. I said, I don't know anything about choral music. I've never been into a cathedral in my life, but I just sort of thought, I'll try this one out. And they enjoy it.
Of course.
And I just love it. And and that's the big enjoyment for us as the 16. Not only seeing the country, it's meeting up with some fabulous people up and down the country, but more importantly, taking the music that we believe in, that we think is good music. And there's a sort of feeling that I like to think there's a feeling that if the 16 think this music's good, then it must be good. But first and foremost is actually the way we perform it. And there's no point us just standing up there, heads down in our copies, making a lovely sound. We are constantly go on about communicating, just as actors do.
Yeah.
And people love that.
And I think you're talking about bringing new music to new audiences. Well, presumably that's part of your collaboration with James McMillan, because, again, one of the things I've stolen from you in my own programming is putting in new commissions in between possibly more familiar sort of harmonic worlds. So even if the music isn't that familiar, if you've got some harmonies that you're used to and then you can put in something new, you will bring people on a journey. But how did that come about, your collaboration with James?
That was amazing. I mean, it was 2002.
Yeah.
And we'd never commissioned any work before. And because I was always, I never found the right composer. And then I'd been sent these scores.
Oh, you struck gold there.
Yeah, James May. So I phoned James up and I said, look, would you write a setting of a Bona Jesu? And he just went, oh my goodness me, this is such a this prayer is so important to Scottish Catholics. And so we paired it with Robert Carver from the late 15th century, isn't it? Yes, late 15th century Scottish composer, with James's rendition of Bunny Years. And we talked in length about the vocal ranges of the group, what the singers like doing, what they, please don't put the sopranos on top C's pianissimo or the basses on bottom C's fortissimo. And James, of course, has lapped it all up. And actually, it's a wonderful relationship over the years. So much so that if one or two of the sopranos don't like that humming bit, they'll say, "Look, James, we don't like humming up on top F's and G's. Don't do it anymore." And it's a lovely relationship.
Yeah.
And for us, of course, as you mentioned before, pairing piece. We did a whole pilgrimage of with the Allegri Miserere and then James's Miserere in the program.
Yeah.
And wherever we went in the world doing it, what piece do they come out talking about? They come out talking about James's Miserere.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing. It's so emotional. It's so powerful. It takes us through every sort of dynamic possible.
It does, but it is the voice of the 16.
Yeah.
The way he sets the words, the way the harmonies work, and I suppose in collaboration with you and with us as well. I'll never forget when we get to the very end of O Buon Gesù, and we know there's three sopranos doing that cluster chord at the end, and your heart is beating all the way up, but actually the effect of that on the audience, it's second to none.
One of the most important things I think about the 16 is that we're singing, most of our music we're singing in Latin. Most of the audience don't know Latin. We've got to somehow, in the way where we sing the music, be projecting the meaning of those words. It's the same way. I mean, you remember some years ago we used to have a wonderful sign.
Yes. We did.
Interpreter, and I remember asking him, what are you doing? He said, well, actually, I'm showing the shapes of the music.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we do in the way we sing. We're showing the shapes of the music. We're showing the way these composers paint the words.
So we talked about fresh music and new discoveries and new compositions. Well, this is the decade where you also got your own fresh opportunity because you were invited to go and conduct the Handel and Haydn Society, and that was in Boston.
Yes. That was in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
I became the artistic director. Previously, back in the, I think, late 70s, early 80s, it had been Christopher Hogwood.
Yeah.
He turned the orchestra into a period orchestra. This is the longest surviving arts organisation in America.
No.
Formed in 1815. Can you imagine that? It's
Wow.
pretty impressive. And, much larger organisation than the 16. And principally, I suppose, the orchestra was the main focus. So, slight difference from the 16. But it had its own professional chorus. I desperately, when I was over there, I tried to prevent them being called a chorus. I wanted them to be called a choir and singers, and it was fantastic for me. And I got the bug for a composer I never thought I would get the bug for, and that was Haydn.
Yeah.
In a big way. I mean, what a composer! Over 100 symphonies, numerous masses, and I just loved it. And I had the big bonus of performing. All my concerts were in Symphony Hall in Boston, probably one of the half-dozen greatest acoustics in the world.
And how do they balance it, Handel versus Haydn? Is it 50-50? Or do the audiences have a greater call for one than the other?
No, funny enough, I mean, their biggest call is sort of Beethoven. I didn't want to conduct Beethoven, but I did... their first ever concert, of course, in 1815 consists of bits of Messiah and bits of creation. So Messiah is a big thing for them. It was just fantastic. Lovely organisation, fabulous patrons, and Boston, just the most glorious city.
Well, they were very lucky to have you. They got the right person for the job, but it did send shivers of fear through the 16. Was it going to go forever? It's very lovely over there. So we were delighted that you didn't, and of course, thank goodness you didn't, because the 16's gone on to bigger and better things. To 2023, not the last decade, not the officially last decade, the latest. Let's say that, your current. And obviously the 16 has seen even greater developments. So tell me about the Genesis Foundation, because I know that's really important to you. And it's been such an exciting thing to see grow and develop over the last 10, 15 years.
Yes, it's amazing. John Sadinsky is the Genesis Foundation. We did his 50th birthday party for him in a little village near Salzburg. So that's where we first met him. He commissioned a piece by Will Todd called Among Angels for 16 solo voices and 2 harps.
Not 18, only 16.
No, only 16. That's a good point. And then, and I think it was somebody on his board, because they asked the question, who's going to perform this? And luckily, somebody on his board said, well, there's only one group that can do this.
No.
That's called the 16. So, and it was the start of a phenomenal relationship. And I remember John saying to me, it's now almost 15 years ago, saying to me, is there something I can do for you as the Genesis Foundation? And I thought, well, Genesis 16, giving young people aged between 18 and 23 the sort of a feeling for what's possible in the world of vocal music. And it's been a phenomenal journey. Right from the outset, it was very much the 16, again, coming back to that family. So the 2 singing tutors are Julie and Charlotte. There are 4 consort tutors, all coming from the group, within the group, and Eamon and myself running it, and we do it as a partnership we play good cop, bad cop all the time, and he's usually bad cop now. Genesis 16, it's basically we see them for 3 weeks in a year, so it's a week before the academic year starts, a week at the end of the academic year, and 2 long weekends in the middle. And at the end of that final course, Eamon and I are usually in shreds, because it's just so emotional.
Yeah.
And see the progress through the year, and to see these students go out into the big wide world, most of them going into some form of music.
And it's really come full circle, hasn't it? I mean, it's a lovely feeling of giving back, but not just giving back. There's nothing... I always try and explain this to people. There's nothing patronising about the way we do things, because I think sometimes people think how lovely, to take in young people and to teach them, but there's never anything from above. It's always done alongside. And I think that's true about the whole of the 16, because of course what most people don't see, we might see the performers and we see you, and what we don't see is that team that's behind you. I mean, even in the office, even going up to the trustees, and there's a movement, which is the 16, and that just keeps going. Do you feel that support has continued? Has it grown over the years?
Oh, it's grown and grown. I mean, we have an incredible team, Mary-Sophie at the helm of it. I mean, working so hard for everybody, and very aware of everybody's livelihoods, there's the social aspects of the group, everything, and very, very, very important, and constantly trying to do work to get the best.
Things have changed an awful lot in the cultural world, and as you said, Genesis is part of giving back and going back to where you started. But another thing you've been looking at is working closely with cathedrals. And how do you feel about that? Because it must feel a little bit like you're a little boy again, going back to these buildings, but thinking about it from that perspective. Why have you decided to put your passion into that at this stage?
Well, my grand age, you were given sort of nice titles. So I was made the president of the Cathedral Music Trust, which is a wonderful, wonderful organisation. And it's developing the interest in singing from a very, very early age, and one of the projects we're working on at the moment is from 0 to 5. But more importantly, because, of that primary school, pre-primary, and that primary school age, of being a chorister, up to age 11 or 12, girls and boys, and bringing that family life into it. So, I was lucky to be in a chorister at Canterbury when there were boarders and day boys, and that feeling of community and feeling that families were very much a part of it. That's what's got to happen even more today. And when I now look at Canterbury, all day boys, part of the school as choristers at Canterbury Cathedral, taking choristers from the big catchment area that Canterbury is. So anybody from any school the possibility of them having that experience is there. And that's got to happen all over the country. And it happens, there are great pockets of the country where there's phenomenal things happening. They happen because of individuals, individuals who have the drive and the desire to enthuse people about this music, because this music is special. It's lovely. We've enjoyed wonderful careers of singing in beautiful, beautiful places and bringing joy to the listeners, and whether that be in a church service or in a concert, in a religious place, in a secular place, it doesn't matter. It's bringing that enjoyment, and as I say, bringing families into it from a very, very, very early age and making them feel very much part of the joy of this wonderful world.
Which is what you've been doing for 7 decades now. And I love the fact that you say it is about individuals, because I think when I started this chat with you, I thought we'd be looking at the music. It'd be very much kind of, pegged along the music. But the way you've described it, it's very much around the people. It's been 7 decades of people for you, I think. So as one of the people, I'd like to say thank you very much for 7 superb decades. But I won't let you off without a quick fire round. So on the spot.
I was worried about this.
Yeah, you knew this was coming. And, I'll just take the answer you give me. I'm just going to give you some simple questions. Football or rugby?
Football.
Wine or beer?
Beer.
I know, that always catches us by surprise. Bird or Tallis?
Oh, impossible.
Kent or Oxford?
Oh, gosh, also impossible. Oxford.
I'll make this one easy for you. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
I don't know why we're still friends. Last but not least, after these 7 decades, looking backwards or looking forwards?
Forwards.
Thanks, Harry.
It's a great pleasure, Elin. Thank you very much.
The sun is given.